The future of conservation certainly depends on the returns realized as our state grows. Texas is home to 7 of the 15 fastest growing cities in the United States. Texas population has increased 48% during the last decade alone. Approaching 30 million in population, we are a state that is no longer rural. In fact, there's only about 350,000 of those 30 million people that own farm, ranch, or forest lands in Texas. So we have about 144 million acres of farms, ranches, and forest lands, basically the backbone of our economy and prosperity, with about less than 1% of our population as landowners that are responsible for stewarding those assets. As such, we risk a diminished connection to nature and our natural resources. As Texas develops, it's critical that conservation interests and businesses work together to assure stewardship of our natural resources. This is for prosperity and for health and for generations to come. The first step in this is understanding the returns realized in investing in conservation projects and programs. This understanding will drive further investments and activity, from urban trail systems, nature access, and food supply, to development and architecture and youth leadership training. The projects presented in this panel are working to understand and articulate the returns for our future. During this panel, you will hear from Jana Renner of Paso del Norte Health Foundation. You'll hear from Trace Hess and Dr. Ben Holland from Cactus Feeders. You will hear from Natalie Wolff from Texas Brigades, and you will hear from Rick Archer, the founding partner and CEO of Overland Partners. Similar to the first panel, you'll hear each presentation in succession, and we'll join the speakers live for Q&A after all the presentations. Please join me in thanking these presenters.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jana Renner. I'm a program officer at the Paso del Norte Health Foundation in El Paso, Texas, and I'm happy to join you virtually today to talk about our trail project, the Paso del Norte Trail. The Paso del Norte Trail is a community vision for a 68-mile trail from county line to county line in El Paso. It's providing us an opportunity to promote active transportation by providing facilities to many in our community who do not have access to multimodal active transportation options. It's also going to create a significant landmark that reflects our culture, preserves our history, and highlights the unique geographical features in our region. And finally, it provides great opportunities for volunteers around education and conservation. The trail is divided into 5 distinct sections that are characterized by urban and rural environments and makes use of our water features, plants, trees, and beautiful views of our mountains that you can see here on the right-hand side of your screen. You can also tell from this picture that El Paso is in a desert, arid environment. It's hot most of the time, but we have beautiful views of our mountains. And what you don't see in this picture is just south of here is our Rio Grande River, and Juarez, Mexico is on the other side. El Paso is home to about 800,000 people. 80% of our population is Hispanic. Like many other communities in Texas and our nation, we struggle with high rates of diabetes and obesity, and 20% of our population live in poverty. However, because of the unique relationship we have with our sister city, Juarez, this is a really vibrant binational community, and there's a lot of pride in our unique culture. The community's had a vision for a county-wide trail for a number of years, and the Health Foundation got involved about 4 to 5 years ago. and started 2 projects that have really catalyzed the momentum that we're seeing now to develop more segments. This is a picture of the Playa Drain Trail, which is currently a 3.4-mile trail that goes from a large county park to a local high school. We funded and oversaw the construction, and it's in a neighborhood that really didn't have a lot of facilities for active transportation, and was meant to be a demonstration project. So we put a lot of amenities for the residents there, include, as you can see in this pictures, benches, shade structures, bike repair stations for those who want to bike the trail, and plenty of wayfinding and signage. This was a partnership with El Paso Water, the City of El Paso, County of El Paso, and the irrigation district here, and does run along an irrigation drain called the Playa Drain. A unique feature along this trail is that there are burrowing owls that are native habitats of the trail, and you'll get to see a picture of those later on. We're also working with the city now to develop more segments of this along this irrigation drain. And once complete, we will have an 8.3-mile trail through this area of town, and we're really excited about that. The second project that we worked on is a master plan that's to develop a trail alignment for the entire county line trail. We worked with a number of residents, with stakeholders from government, nonprofit, and the private sector. And because we didn't want this plan to sit on the shelf for a long time with no one working on it, we developed an advisory committee of these stakeholders to help us mobilize funding and to develop more segments of the trail. The next slide will show a picture of our River Park Trail. That's an older segment of the trail that was developed in the early 2000s. And this really started the vision of the County Line Trail and is located, as you can see, along the Rio Grande Valley. There's a lot of evidence out there about the benefits of trails, and I think that these are becoming more and more evident as we're coming out of this pandemic. Trails have provided people safer places to exercise and just to get out and clear their heads. As a health foundation, we got involved in trail development because we knew that our community needed more opportunities and to get out and be active. And the trails aren't just for avid bicyclists or runners. It's for people who need just a short connection to walk their kids to school or to go to the store or go to church. Trails really enhance not only the quality of life of individuals because it gives them a chance to get out and enjoy nature and be outdoors, but it also, they're great amenities for communities. And we're seeing that in addition to really being these great amenities, they're also a great investment because they have longevity, and they, even though they do need to be maintained, they actually last for a long time and are a great investment. There's also a lot of evidence that property values of homes that are near trails increase when there are trails around. It can also enhance retail environments, bring in new retail around places that have developed trails. And finally, communities are really seeing a lot of benefits of providing pedestrian and cycling facilities and not just focusing their resources on maintaining and building roads for cars. So why does this trail matter for El Paso County? Well, just to piggyback on a lot of the benefits that I just talked about, I think that these pictures demonstrate what this would mean. You can see that there's a lot of natural habitat in El Paso that's underdeveloped, that people don't have access to, but would be great facilities for people to use to get from place to place. And there are a lot of communities in our county who don't have sidewalks or don't have ways to get from place to place, as you can see in this picture here of this man who has to travel along the street. I think the best story I can think of what this trail means to the community is how we have this great picture of when we were constructing the Playa Drain Trail, people from that community were actually walking behind the construction vehicles who were tamping down the dirt before they laid the asphalt, because this was such a needed amenity in that community. This also illustrates a great way that a trail could benefit a more urban area along the trail alignment that goes from the zoo to our medical centers of America. The rendering on the right shows our vision for this great waterfront trail where a community that doesn't really have a lot of amenities could really build on having a trail with a waterfront along it. So while we've been working to develop new sections of the trail, we've also spent a lot of time trying to engage the community and to encourage volunteerism along the trail. And I want to give a shout out to Quantum Engineering, who has helped us and is really the one that's leading the efforts around community engagement along the trail. So one thing that we've done is secured some funding to build bioswales and plant trees. We also have an active media campaign where the trail is promoted frequently, and we partner with events with other organizations that have outdoor events such as Celebration of Our Mountains, the Border Coalition for Fitness, and Live Active El Paso, who hold outdoor events and also provide education about health or about the history of the area or the natural features around the trail. We've also set up a Friends of the Trail campaign to try to get donations for amenities along completed segments of the trail, but to also encourage volunteerism and to get people to sign up to volunteer for these events. The trail is beloved by our cycling shops and by cycling groups. Before the pandemic, there were local cycling groups that would get together and use the trail at least monthly on their trail rides. These events are really well attended. You can see the longer that we really started to get some people who are really interested in the trail who will come back and use it and will sign up to volunteer for events. We've planted over 20 trees with funding from Walmart and AARP. And I'm really excited about this. I think that in a few years, we're going to have some really great shade canopy along sections of the trail. And I want to point out the picture on the on the left corner with the dogs. We hosted an event recently called Trails and Tales, where people were able to bring their pets out, and it was really a lot of fun. And finally, recently, just last weekend, we had an inaugural trail ride of the entire alignment, where 15 trail enthusiasts cycled the length of the trail. And Texan by Nature's Jenny Borden joined us, and it was really a beautiful day and gave people the opportunity to see what it would be like to have this great amenity in our community, and to find, but to also look for ways that different sections could be enhanced. In addition to these trail events, we've also had some additions to the trail through funding from the National Recreation and Park Association, and with the support of the staff from Quantum Engineering and volunteers. We've added more habitats for burrowing owls and for bats. The trees that have planted have been native to our area and are drought tolerant. And the bioswales that we put in are able to capture 31,000 gallons of water to prevent flooding. So that's great. And here are some great pictures of the results of all of these efforts. You can see on the left, this bioswale that has captured a lot of water to prevent the flooding on the street. These new trees that have been planted. And finally, as promised earlier, here's the picture of that burrowing owl. People really love to find them along the trail. They're really, really cute. And finally, this is my favorite picture of the that we have of the trail. This is from an opening event that we had of the Playa Drain Trail. And it really captures the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish, and that's to develop a trail for everyone. People of all abilities, all ages, giving them the opportunity to get outside, enjoy nature, clear their heads, and get out and move around. So on behalf of the Paso del Norte Health Foundation, our CEO, Tracy Yellen, and Quantum Engineering, particularly Lauren Baldwin, who has spearheaded a lot of these efforts, I'd like to thank Texan by Nature for the opportunity to partner with you over the last 18 months and to learn from you. Thank you.
I'm Trace Hess, one of the employee owners of Cactus Feeders. Cactus Feeders has 800 employees and own and operate 10 feed yards throughout the Texas Panhandle and southwest Kansas, with a one-time capacity of 550,000 head. We have another 100,000 head of cattle outside of our feed yards, with 7,000 head of cows raising calves for our supply chain. Cactus Feeders was founded in 1975 by Paul Engler. In 1990, the employees were given the opportunity to become part owners of the company, and our ESOP program was founded. In 2010, the employees bought out the remaining shares from Paul and the Engler family, and we became 100% employee owned. And that ownership continues through today. The grazing program started with Cactus Feeders trying to build a supply chain of feeder cattle that would take us further back into the production cycle of the cattle industry. Texas has the largest cow herd in the United States. The price of corn in the Midwest gives the feed yards from that part of the country a price advantage that allows them to come to Texas and take our feeder cattle up there to be finished. Grazing cattle on forage allows us to have production costs that are just as competitive, if not more competitive, than putting cattle directly on feed in the Midwest. We continue to see evidence that the water table is dropping in parts of the Texas Panhandle. We believe we can take these farms and convert them to grazing operations with cover crops and perennial grasses. This will reduce the amount of water we are using to irrigate in total and significantly change the peak demand periods of water usage. At the same time, we must build the organic matter in these soils to capture more rainfall when it occurs, and further reduce the need to supplement with irrigation. For every 1% we increase the organic matter in the soil will hold an additional 15 to 20,000 gallons of water. The abundant supply of feeder cattle, coupled with our more favorable weather and longer growing season, will allow us to take advantage of the resources we have here in Texas and continue to build on the economic sustainability of our business, our communities, and our region.
I would like to introduce Dr. Ben Holland, who is going to talk to you about the science behind our grazing program.
Grazing program at Cactus Feeders are to do a couple of things. One is to develop a supply chain of cattle that allows us to procure animals that we otherwise wouldn't, lighter weight, and prepare them for the feed yard. Keeping the cattle in Texas and in the South Plains where they originated from. And then number two would be to utilize the irrigation resource that we have today to improve the soil health that we have, improve the soil carbon or organic matter that exists, and prepare those soils for a future in which we don't have supplemental irrigation to utilize. Our region has had a fascinating history as it relates to land use. From grazing ruminants, the buffalo, we transitioned to ranching and trail drives and open range to smaller pastures. We transitioned from there to dryland farming, which resulted in an ecological disaster of the Dust Bowl. And out of that, we evolved into utilizing supplemental irrigation to better utilize our topsoil and conserve it while producing crops. But at the same time, we've depleted that finite resource. So the next evolution is going to be what we do when we can only do deficit irrigation or have limited water that we're able to supplement our rainfall with. One of the exciting things about being part of the cattle industry, or really other ruminant livestock are similar, is the ability for those animals to do a couple things. One is thrive almost anywhere in the country. So if you look at the cow herd in the United States, cows are everywhere from Florida to Montana, deserts of Arizona to good pasture land like we have in Texas. And then as those cows produce calves and those calves mature, they move across the country and they serve as a custom harvest crew, utilizing feedstuffs that are not useful for human nutrition and turning that into beef. Once we get those animals into the feed yard, we still can utilize products that are otherwise trash. Well, things like corn stalks, cotton burrs, which are byproducts from producing corn and cotton, things like distiller's grains, which is what's left over after you make fuel ethanol from corn. And you use those products that are not useful for human nutrition, and you can turn those into beef. The Texas Panhandle is an excellent place to feed cattle. Our relatively high elevation, a dry, arid climate, low rainfall, high winds, the ability for us to cool off at night in the summer and have relatively mild winters make it a really good spot to raise livestock. However, those same factors make it kind of a tough place to raise the feed that we'd like to feed, such as corn. On the other hand, the Midwestern U.S. is excellently prepared to produce corn and other grains, but their long, wet winters and more humid summers make it a more difficult place to feed cattle. There's some interesting research out of Texas A&M where Tryon Wickersham calculated that if you took the corn that would be fed to a growing steer in a feed yard and you used it instead to feed young growing children, you could meet the amino acid requirements of about 3 young kids in the course of a year. On the other hand, if you take that corn and you do feed it to the cattle, and then you let the children eat the beef that is produced, you can meet the amino acid requirements of 17 children. So it's not necessarily that the world is short of calories, or we have lots of calories. Corn, other grains are a good source of that. What the world is short of is amino acids and protein, and ruminant animals serve a unique function in upgrading or upcycling nutrients that are not useful for human nutrition and turning that into a really high quality product. So for the past 50 or 60 years, we've supplemented natural rainfall in our farming in the Texas High Plains with irrigation water drawn from the Ogallala Aquifer. And as a result, we've depleted that resource to the point where some of the wells don't produce what they did years ago, and we're not able to grow the same crops on the same acres as we did historically. For example, if we look at our irrigated farm around Cactus Feed Yard near Cactus, Texas, today we could grow about 15 to 1,800 acres of corn. And if we took that corn and fed it in our feed yard, we could meet the requirements of that 75,000 head feed yard for about 7 days. So the question is the best use of our water to grow corn, which we do need and use, or should we let the corn be grown in the Midwest where we're really good at growing corn, and let the cattle be fed in Texas? And if so, what should we do with the acres and the water that we have, the groundwater we have today, to support this region and this industry? In a recent publication, researchers modeled the decline of the Ogallala aquifer from now into the future and projected what would happen to acres that are currently in irrigation. So if an acre is currently in irrigation, is it going to remain in irrigated farming into the future? Is it going to transition from irrigated farming to dry land farming? Or is the land marginal enough that it may transition from irrigated farming back to some sort of native pasture or grassland? And they projected that by the year 2100, many of the acres, as many as 20 to 25% of the acres that are currently under irrigation in counties which we operate in the High Plains and Texas Panhandle, would transition from irrigation today into grasslands in the future. And so our mandate is to take the irrigation water resource that we have today and speed up the transition or the improvement in soil health that we may have to make in the future. Because if we wait until we can't supplement rainfall with irrigation, the transition or the improvement in soil organic matter, all those things that are our goals for the future and the things we talk about will be much harder to do than they are today. And so the goals of our grazing program at Cactus Feed Yard are to provide calves that we can procure at a lighter weight from cow-calf operations in our region and in others, grow and develop them to a weight that is suitable for placement into the feed yard and a background that is suitable for placement into the feed yard. And at the same time, utilize the groundwater irrigation that we have today in combination with the grazing to develop our soils, drive through forage production and animal grazing, the microbiology that will allow more organic matter to be captured in the soil. And after organic matter increases in the soil, be able to hold more water in a given area of soil and increase the ability of rainwater or any water that hits that soil, whether it's from irrigation or from rain, to infiltrate and not sit on the surface and evaporate or run off. As we manage, develop, and strive to improve our grazing program now and into the future, we have to think of a couple of important tenets of soil health. Number one is to always have cover. Research out of Kansas suggests that evaporation from bare soil itself can be as much as 30% of total evapotranspiration, and that residual cover over the soil can result in 2.5 to 3.5 inches of water savings during a growing year. At times, we as livestock producers, cattle people, we have a fear of wasting grass. The cattle could eat that. But cover comes from shades due to growing plants, residue from material that is stomped in by the livestock, both of which will be non-existent if we graze to the ground. The second is to always have living roots. Where does the material that ultimately will be organic matter come from? Forage, cover, organic matter, they all come from growing plants supported by the microbiome in the soil. We hope to prevent the disruptions to this natural process as much as possible. A portion of what we're doing, growing crops of multiple seasons on the same field, is to change water. We want to be counter-seasonal to our irrigation somewhat to what our neighbors in row crop production are doing. And third is to implement intensive adaptive grazing. Forage plants are extremely resilient to grazing pressure, especially if that grazing pressure is relatively short and the plants have an extended period of time to recover between when it's grazed. So we try to concentrate the animals on a relatively small area, grazing very intensely, and then move those animals to a different paddock, which will have more forage available to the animals, and the previous one then has an opportunity to rest, grow, and produce more for the next time it gets grazed. So certainly a work in progress, and we've got to ask ourselves the question, how fast could it happen? There's lots of things yet to learn. We've collected samples from some of our fields, and we have maybe a third to a half percentage point increase in organic matter in the clear trend, and what's the maximum amount of organic matter that we could reach. In a future state, what can be done with 3 to 5 inches of supplemental irrigation per acre? And as we think about the region and the potential to produce row crops, we know concentration of inputs on crop acres will happen. So what does a multi-year rotation look like where we concentrate water and inputs in row crops and develop grazing acres and hopefully improve soil health on some of the other crops for a long period of time? On behalf of the 800 employee owners of Cactus Feeders, I'd like to thank Just by Nature for inviting us to participate in this summit today, for recognizing us as a Texan 20 in 2019, and allowing us to join in the conversation about conservation and resource future. At Cactus Feeders, our mission statement is feeding a hungry world, family, friends, and neighbors. And we believe through intentional stewardship of our resources, we'll be able to produce more food with less resource use at an affordable cost for every Texan now and into the future.
Good morning. My name is Natalie Wolff, and I am the Executive Director of Texas Brigades. And today I'll be visiting with you about how Texas Brigades is developing future returns. As Texans, we all know that we are connected to the land, water, and natural resources. The key to this connection is translating it to a growing and increasingly disconnected population. Some of us were blessed with access to regularly and freely run wild through the pastures, fields, brush, barns, and gravel pits, what I like to call the good old days. Those opportunities connected my care for natural resources at an early age. I noticed the flower and bloom changes that came with the seasons and precipitation, wildlife movements, and feral cat movements, and all kinds of surprises that one can find at a watering hole. Many of us had good mentors, mine being my grandpa and my dad, who were both rooted in hardworking ranch and farm life. All of this to say that when you have the ability to chat with conservation-oriented and minded professionals and stewards, they will tell you that they had nature-connecting experiences and good mentors that helped them develop their passions for nature. It is for these reasons and many more that I am passionate about Texas Brigades and the stewardship development it has sharpened for almost 30 years. Texan by Nature and the East Foundation projected that Texas has lost 2.2 million acres of native landscapes due to population growth and urbanization. Texas is home to 7 of the 15 fastest growing cities in the US, and its population has increased over 48% in the last decade alone. With these staggering statistics and an obvious expected increase in needs, we know what kinds of pressures that this will put on our resources. Kids know it too. Texas Brigades educates adolescents on the importance of natural resources and gives them experiences to understand how natural resources affect them, both personally and within their communities and regions. We don't want to just tell them how the natural resources should affect them. We want to encourage their use of critical thinking. We do this by folding in scenarios and exercises that simultaneously develop their skills and abilities to articulate their experiences or understanding of natural resources to others, advocating for natural resources and their values while building confidence in their voices, leadership skills, and eventually career paths. Texas Brigades aims to offer the right experiences and resources to form a new generation of conservation and land stewards in Texas. Along with the issue of mass urbanization, less than 1% of Texans are landowners, and there's a diminished connection to nature amongst several Texas youth. The majority of landowners are aging, and over the next 20 years, Texas will undergo the largest intergenerational transfer of land in its history. Texas Brigades ambassadors are imperative in a time of so much change. The next generation of stewards needs to be empowered through their connections, through their mentors and education to protect the natural resources and native landscapes that our economy depends on. Through programs like our summer brigade camps, Texas Brigades is connecting adolescents to nature and helping them build their conservation network, ensuring natural resource stewardship and conservation are a long-term priority for both urban and rural backgrounds alike. In each of its programs, Texas Brigades works with education and conservation professionals to transfer technical and conservation information to its participants, such as plant and animal dynamics, hunting and firearms safety and ethic, ecological systems and their functions, and economic impacts to the state. Texas Brigades folds in critical thinking and leadership exercises to facilitate personal and team development. Participants learn how to function within and outside of their comfort zones, equipping them to push through discomfort and push their own learning boundaries as they sharpen their character, sharpening themselves to speak up, to actively and willingly listen to others, and to communicate through situations are just some of those life skills that Brigades cadets become experts in. We aim to orient young minds towards conservation and stewardship, regardless of their career paths or where they're from. As the Texas Brigades alumni network grows, we are working to build a strategy to reconnect with our nearly 4,000 strong alumni families. As we connect, we learn there are many routes a graduate can take. Over time, we've assessed how well our participants learn program topics, as it helps us measure overall knowledge gained, and it helps us evaluate our teaching methods. With Texan by Nature's help, we've been able to take that measurement further by developing a way to measure takeaways from valuable math, science, policy, and industry-based topics. For example, 2020 Ranch Brigade cadets graduated with a 44% knowledge increase in science topics, 37% increase in natural resource management topics, and nearly 15% increase in beef industry knowledge. Texas Brigades also measures short-term impacts after camp using self-reported data from submitted books of accomplishments. These record books help graduates showcase how they shared their Texas Brigades and conservation stories with thousands of people across the state annually. Further, they're educating themselves through classes, by joining organizations, and through assisting professionals in the field. It is through these reported activities and efforts that Texas Brigades awards upwards of $40,000 in college scholarships annually through its camp committees. As times change and communication and learning methods evolve, Texas Brigades works to update activities, opportunities, and reporting methods to better assess the outreach efforts that Brigades cadets are doing. When we think of long-term impacts, we get really excited as we have second-generation Brigade participants. We recently began to formulate a plan to engage our alumni and build a model to understand the Brigade's attributes woven into a variety of pathways, from business owners, doctors, lawyers, community leaders, parents, and more. Texan by Nature has helped facilitate thought and action towards building a model to measure our long-term impact on both Brigade's cadets' life trajectories and their lasting ecological and economic impacts. Texas Brigades is also reviewing its participant data to understand what gaps exist in our camper outreach, whether it be communities, counties, cultures, or regions. As a former participant, I was an adult leader in 2007. I was blown away by the sheer intensity of the program, amazed at the collegiate level information and strict schedule, and enjoyed being a part of a bonding within a team and an entire battalion. As an adult, I experienced a full transformation from a chunk of coal to a bright and shining diamond. I can't forget that summer and have been lucky enough to have enjoyed many Texas Brigade summers since. I believe it is the consistency of the Brigade Camp program that has been by far a best practice, ensuring no matter what Brigade Camp you graduated from, you are learning from professional and passionate stewards who share their knowledge and time to equip you for your life's journey. The consistency is partly due to the age of the program. We're almost 30 years in, but we've also recently updated our summer camp handbook that equips volunteers with an understanding of their important role in molding young ambassadors. Additionally, camp committees work to incorporate new volunteers in the form of participants first, like adult leaders, so that they really understand camp, the atmosphere, and the importance of the Brigade integrity. Essentially, we want them to drink the Kool-Aid first before serving it. Further, building strong and reliable relationships with volunteers who implement our programs is imperative. As Texas Brigades has evolved, so has our volunteer base. Understanding volunteer abilities, limits, and passions while providing training opportunities motivates volunteers to give back, accomplishing our goals together. I would like to conclude by telling you that if any of this resonated with you, Texas Brigades is seeking you. If you are an adolescent or happen to know of one, we have programs for different ages, locations, and interests. Find out more about us at texasbrigades.org and follow us on social media platforms. I would say the same for adults who may be interested in volunteering. Serving 5 days of your summer as an adult leader is life-changing. I am walking proof of that. And it is the best path towards other opportunities and committee involvement within our organization. If you work or volunteer with a like-minded organization, we want to collaborate with you on reaching youth audiences with a natural resource-driven curriculum and content outside of the classroom. While our urban audience has increased, we are looking to get our programs in front of more urban and city youths. For our experiences and wild programs, we have a lot of flexibility on topic and curriculum if we have a location and volunteer support. We are also seeking to reach volunteers, participants, and opportunities in areas outside of our typical reach, which is primarily the outer regions of the state.
Hi, I'm Rick Archer. I'm one of the founding principals at Overland Partners, who are an architecture and urban design firm based in San Antonio, but we do work all around the world. I am really pleased to be with you all today for this Texan by Nature conference, which is thinking about how we invest today for future returns. And this convergence of both business and conservation efforts is something that is vitally important as we think about our future. Overland Partners is located in a 1918 warehouse that we converted into our office environment. Truly has been a transformational project, not just for Overland. I think it really increased our ecological ethos as one of the Committee on the Environment's top 10 projects in 2015. It's highly sustainable. But maybe more importantly than that, conserving and preserving, restoring this building was truly transformational for the neighborhood around us. We've seen that the neighborhood just blossom from being derelict to being a place of real vibrancy. And I think that's part of what happens when we take seriously our role to conserve things today, is that we end up with a future return, sometimes very quickly, that radically impacts the trajectory of a place. We didn't just start doing this, however. Back in 1992, we were hired by Lady Bird Johnson to create the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center in Austin. At the time, the environmental movement was nascent. I really like to think about Lady Bird as the mother of the environmental movement. And she had a vision, an aspiration for promoting the use of native plants for their aesthetic, economic, and environmental value. And so together we created a place which would model total resource conservation. It was from the beginning about conservation. And one of the things that I'm really excited to be here today is that Lady Bird and Laura Bush were obviously close friends. When the Wildflower Center opened, the Bushes hosted the opening reception at the Governor's Mansion in Austin, and have had a real affinity with the Bushes and their commitment to conservation throughout the state. But I think what this project did was truly unique in that there had not been a public building built in the United States at this point that was really looking to model how we build on a fragile landscape. Lady Bird used to say, if we don't have our bluebonnets, would we really be Texans? And I think that's really at the heart of conservation, that so much of our identity as people is found in the place that we inhabit. When we started this project with her, we said, this is your vision, it's your dream. What do you want it to be? And she said, well, I just want it to look like God put it there. Not a small challenge for us, but working closely with her on this modest project, it really reframed the way people thought about building. We thought about everything from the standpoint of how does it conserve and preserve resources, how does it enhance the environment, and how does it contribute to human flourishing. And it was a precursor to leadership in environmental, energy and environmental design, and to sustainable sites. And so as such, this little project became a real harbinger of things to come. After that, the opportunity to work at the Bracken Bat Cave, which is just north of San Antonio. Really a phenomenal site that is home to 30 or 40 million Mexican free-tailed bats. They live in these caves between March and November when they go and honeymoon or winter in Mexico. And, part of the notion here was to take bats, which are often seen as evil or associated with being creatures of the night, which they are, and provoke people, inspire people to think differently, not only about bats, but about the natural environment. These bats emerge every night out of this cave and consume like 2 times their weight in insects. They are literally the air defense system for North America from all the moths and insects that are coming up from the south that are heading to the croplands of America. And as a result of the efforts of these bats, they literally save the United States billions and billions of dollars every year in lost crops, pesticides, and obviously also improve the environment. The center we created both gave a viewing platform so you could watch the bats emerge, but it also created a cave-like experience for humans to go in and experience some of what it is like to be in a bat cave. Part of the power of this was we said, well, what are the bats delivered to us that might be used in a way to conserve energy. And their guano, if you ever smelled a bat cave, is high in ammonia. And ammonia is made up largely of hydrogen. And so we were able to process that ammonia, turn it into hydrogen fuel cells, which will fuel this center, hopefully one day when it's complete. So again, an investment in creative thinking today, an investment in the preservation of habitat, returns a future which is biodiverse and really preserves one of the uniquenesses of this state. Up the road from that, near Leakey, Texas, is Lady Lodge. This is a place that was built by the HEB Foundation, and the idea here is to connect man with God through nature. And so it really is a center of faith and culture that's built on conservation principles. It sits on the banks of the Frio River, crystal clear, rock bottom, spring-fed river that is really one of the jewels in our waterways here in Texas. And what we did there was we renovated the lodge, but we also created a new place called Cedar Break. It's really a retreat center within the retreat center. And the goal here was to really cultivate that relationship, the relationship between people and one another, between people and nature, and between people and God. And so by cultivating those relationships, we ensure a return that in this case includes making sure that the river is kept pristine for future generations. When we began this project, we measured the water quality of the Frio River. We measured it during construction to make sure that we weren't contributing to its demise. And then we measured it afterward. And in fact, proved that through sustainable building practices, we could improve the water quality downstream of our project. That's a great return. We are currently getting ready to start construction on Quinta Mazatlan. Quinta Mazatlan is a part of the World Birding Center, a system of 7 sites across the Rio Grande Valley. This one's in McAllen. It's really the crown jewel of the World Birding Center. You may not know, but Texas is one of the greatest places for bird watching because of the number of species that come up through that narrow passageway between North and South America and then begin to fan out across the states. That allows us to really create an incredible bird watching experience, but in this case, create a building which is habitat for the birds so that people and birds can get in closer proximity to one another. We're creating a Center for Urban Ecology, which is a partnership with UT Rio Grande Valley. It also is a way to educate and equip kids and others to think about their future. And it creates an environment which is both fun and exciting to be in and yields a return that both preserves and conserves the bird species, acknowledges that the natural world crosses borders because these birds are coming from South America to North America every year. I think they give us a model for how to live at peace with one another, and they give us a model for how to live at peace with the land. And so the future return here is really educating the children of today to continue to conserve and celebrate the diversity that we have here in the state of Texas. The last project I want to share with you is Child Safe. And while I talked a lot about our relationship to nature, I think one of the critical things that we like to think about is how do the buildings that we create be more than just buildings, which is what we believe, that they actually have deep embedded potential that's waiting to be unlocked. And in the case of this project, San Antonio, sadly, has the highest incidence of child abuse per capita in the state. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused by the time they turn 18. And so we have a massive problem. What we've learned, both through research and through collaboration with the staff here at Child Safe, which is a center for those abused children and their families, is that connecting them to nature is one of the most healing therapies that they can possibly experience. And so the notion that health and nature, conservation and human well-being not only coexist, but are essential to one another, is something that we want to celebrate. And so we've created literally a center of well-being here, a center that connects children with nature for flourishing of all people and all generations. Well, you might have noticed there were 5 major topics that I discussed: aspiration, inspiration, relationship, stewardship, and well-being. One of the things that Overland noted over the years was while there were robust measuring systems for how we treated the environment, there weren't any around how humans and the environment interact for the benefit of both. And so we created what we call the human handprint. It's a way that we measure. We set up key performance indicators with our clients before every project. We make sure that we're missionally aligned. That's aspiration, pointing the way. Where are we going? Why are we doing this? What do we accomplish? Inspiration, which is the middle finger, can also be provocation. In the case of this outdoor facility at Child Safe, we wanted to provoke people to think about this horrible crisis of children in San Antonio. The ring finger is relationships, the relationship between us and nature, us and one another, us and what we believe, relationship between what we do today and what happens in the future are key things that we're looking at on every single project we do. And then the last digit is a thumb, and it's how are we doing? Are we contributing to human flourishing? Are we making a difference? Does the place we're creating really matter? And so all of that, the human handprint, is about taking the kinds of things that Texan by Nature has been promoting, this symbiotic relationship between economics, environment, and aesthetics, and bringing them together in a way that ensures human flourishing for all people. Look forward to being a part of the panel with you. Thanks for listening.
Hey, I think you'll agree with me that those are some pretty outstanding examples of a return on conservation. Let's start our next panel. We've got panelists joining us up here. I think, is it Jana? Oh, and there's Natalie Wolff. Hi, Natalie. And we have Rick Archer is here. He's on his way. I'm sorry, got the sun in my eyes, right? Good.
Howdy.
And then joining us by Zoom or by remote is Ben Holland, Dr. Ben Holland with Cactus Feeders, and Jana Renner with Paso del Norte Trail. So, just starting off, I guess I had a question for Ben Holland, and don't forget you can ask questions over the Slack line, the conservationsummit.slack.com, or if you're right here, make sure that you alert someone that's got a microphone over there. So, Ben, a lot of the things that Cactus Feeders is doing in order to increase organic matter in soils are the same things that you would do in order to accumulate carbon and measure carbon accumulation. I'm wondering if that's an innovation that Cactus Feeders is beginning to look at and what that might mean for offsetting greenhouse gases and some of the methane from beef cattle production.
Sure, that's a good question. You know, the plants through interaction with the sun and light take carbon dioxide right out of the air, and that creates feed for our cattle. Some of that goes back out as methane. Some of it retains in animals and becomes beef or food products. And then some of the carbon that's captured by those plants does have the opportunity to remain stored in the soil in short or long-term storage. So yeah, Neil, I think that's a good opportunity in a project like this to think about both quantifying the water use and the carbon sequestration and the the magnitude of how much we can store and be able to build models about how others can participate and do that as well.
Great. You guys are really innovators there. Do we have questions up there? You are.
There it goes. Thank you. Hi. My question was for Texas Brigades. How were you able to adjust your programming during COVID-19, if and how? Because I know it must have been difficult to hold these camps.
That is a really good question, and it was very challenging. Being that Texas Brigades has 8 different camps, we work with a lot of different volunteers and a lot of different volunteer committees. So not only as individuals was it tough, but also with the committees as well. So what we did is we had a lot of deliberations, heard a lot, not only from the board of directors who are also volunteers, but from parents and of course the kids and really the volunteers that implement the programs. And it was tough. As you can imagine, it was multi-sided, a lot of strong views. And ultimately, we really had to go with our gut, and we had to see what we could do from guidelines from the state and see if we could safely implement our programs. And not only safely, but can we do it in a way that they're going to get something from it? We didn't want to decrease the integrity of those camps. So that was really difficult. And so ultimately, we listened to our volunteers, and we had some camp. Actually, we had one camp, and some of our others we did have to cancel for a variety of reasons, just based on all the networking that we work with, whether it was the facility or the volunteer concerns, some parent concerns. So we were able to implement one camp that was, my goodness, a success, and we were so happy for that. And we were talking about that the other day, that being able to do that safely really gave us the foundation that we were able to implement 8 camps this summer safely, and we already kind of had that under our belt. So we were really happy for that.
Okay. A question just in for Rick with Overland Partners. So you've had a hand, and your firm has had a hand in some of the most innovative designs that incorporate sustainability in Texas and in South Texas. What lessons learned would you suggest should be applied to conservation and all industries in business that just a lesson learned that we could apply elsewhere?
Great question. We have been really privileged. Actually, I will say that I didn't get into this business as a conservationist. In fact, Lady Bird Johnson taught me to think about conservation when I realized that we were designing a place that was going to have her imprint on it. But that has shaped the entire trajectory of our practice. And I think what we've learned, and this is one of the things that I loved about working with her, is it wasn't an either or. You know, one of the things that we've seen emerge in the environmental movement was this notion that, in fact, I had one environmentalist say, the solution to the world's problems is to ship all humans off the planet. And in fact, I think that's actually antithetical to real conservation, because I think the thing that we've learned is it's this symbiotic relationship that man is a part of nature, that we have a vital role in it as stewards of creation, and that when we play our role properly, that actually nature is enhanced. And when we don't do our job well, we can be incredibly destructive. We've learned a lot about resiliency. I think during COVID-19, we've seen the earth bounce back very quickly when we stop abusing it. And I think that part of what I hope that people will learn from design is that we need to take seriously to do whatever we can do and get beyond the political rancor about, well, is it climate change or is it not? Is it having an impact or is it not? That does not excuse us from not doing the best we can do with what we've been given. And so I think that what we've tried to do is in every single project model how we would live in harmony with nature and how we would leave the world a better place. I mean, it's a pretty simple thing. And we've had the privilege of working with Native American tribes. We work with the Maori people in New Zealand. We've worked with people all around the world. And I would say one of the things that we learned from the Native Americans, of course, they're known as conservationists. They live in this symbiotic relationship with the land. But the Maori have this saying, what is the most important thing in the world? It's the people, it's the people, it's the people. And so what we're trying to do is get people to think about human flourishing and the earth flourishing simultaneously. And in order to do that, we're going to have to find better ways to measure human flourishing. We need sociologists and psychologists and population researchers and others to engage, just like we're doing with the hard sciences, so that we can develop systems for measuring how we perform. And I think that will carry over into every single industry that we're involved with.
Wow. Well, I know San Antonians are proud to call your firm a San Antonio firm. So
we're proud to be in San Antonio.
A question for Paso del Norte Trail for Jana. How do we get more of what you do? What would you do in order to convince communities elsewhere that they need to follow your lead? And what returns would you share with them in order to encourage them?
Thanks for the question. I think that one of the things that we've learned along the way is you need partnerships with many people to get something like a countywide trail developed, and you have to start conversations with lots of people along the way and take whatever momentum you can get at the time. There are 5 different pieces to this trail and that go through multiple jurisdictions. And so what we've been able to do is capitalize on what excitement is in each piece and see how we can maximize our partnerships there and get stakeholders who are involved to start applying for funding, and then look at how we can get those trail pieces developed. I think that what we're seeing now is that even though it's a very time-consuming process, each little piece that gets developed just adds to the excitement and really creates a lot of momentum, and that's starting to build. And so once something is developed, more people want to see that in their part of the community. And so I think having patience and really cultivating partnerships have led to what we've seen so far. And our vision is a very long-term vision, but it's to see this trail that has many unique pieces to it that capitalizes not only on the distinct features of those trails, but can help build economic development, get people out and walking, and really see returns in investment in lots of different areas.
Thank you. You've got a question up top here.
Yeah, this one is from online for Dr. Holland. So you've started, thinking through building those future returns for your operation. What are the next steps? What is the next innovation that you have on the horizon for expanding this thinking?
Well, I think that we're still early in our process in working with these acres, right? We're within a couple of years of beginning in some and have a ways to go to transition some of the land that we're involved in today. So I think the next step is really focusing on quantifying the magnitude of these changes and the repeatability of them, and our ability to infiltrate water better, to store carbon, to hold water after we get it into the soil. And that helps us at the same time develop economic models which can help us make a business decision if we're going to acquire more acres through lease or ownership or partnership with other landowners, and in addition to that, help our neighbors understand opportunities that may exist that they haven't thought of before.
Natalie, Texas Brigades represents one of the best examples of youth leadership development out there. And you've been around long enough that you've got, real proof that leaders have come from within Texas Brigades. So people that went to Brigades back 20 years ago are now in leadership positions. When you talk to them, what do they tell you is the most valuable part of Brigades for them?
I would say it varies, but the majority of them will say that it was the connections that they made with not only other participants at those camps, but with the connections they made with those future mentors. You'll hear them say that they connected with a veterinarian, and you'll see a veterinarian come from that. But you'll also see those kids that want to be a veterinarian and get that experience at camp and decide, maybe I don't want to be a veterinarian. So I really feel like not only is it impactful sometimes for kids to experience things to open up their minds and help them decide what path they want to take, but it can also help them either steer them in the way they think they want to go, or it can steer them in a completely different direction. So that's why you'll see path cadets become biologists and field conservationists, but you'll also see them in performance arts, and you'll see them in being lawyers and all kinds of dentists even. We're really looking for those senators and congressmen. We hope to really give them the experience. And again, it's just that connection and how it connects with you in here internally, and how that's going to impact your trajectory, whether it is being in the state capitol or in an office building or out in the field. But we feel like those connections with not only those mentors, but also just with nature, are going to send them on so many different paths. And as long as they have that connection, they're going to do good with it.
Thank you. That's great. What you guys are doing is great.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions up there?
There it goes. For Rick, can you share how you developed the human handprint methodology and provide an example of how one of your clients responded?
Yeah, it actually was really fun how it developed. We did this thing where we printed out a poster, and it was a cover of Time magazine, and on the front of it, it said, "Overland, how did they do it?" And then we engaged the entire office in answering that question, what was it? And what was fascinating that developed around that was that no one really talked about architecture. It was the impact we were having on the world, whether it was an abused child or a homeless person or someone living in poverty given an opportunity, or preserving the planet. And so then we asked the question, okay, well, if that's what our goal is, if architecture is simply the vehicle for accomplishing those things, then how would we measure success? How would we know if we had actually done it? And so we brainstormed together, and we had a rule that none of the partners could speak, and everyone else was talking, and the teams began to come up with this idea that what humans were going around the world with what we called a big-ass footprint. They were just stomping on the world and destroying things where they went. And someone said, well, you know, the antithesis of that is the hand. It's the handprint. Why don't we go out and put a handprint on the world rather than a footprint? And through that, then we began to say, well, what are the digits of the hand? What makes a hand a thing of caring, of greeting, and so we took the design principles that we were already using and began to formulate them into the 5 digits, and that became the human handprint. What's been fascinating to me is it's the one thing that our clients absolutely remember when we sit down with them, especially when I get to the middle finger and I say it's provocation. Especially the churches we work with when we do that. But it is something that they've really embraced. It's something they speak back to us. It becomes a part of their lexicon. And they will begin to ask us, well, how are we doing on the relationships that are important here? And we'll set up key KPIs with them. So unlike LEAD and other measuring systems, it's unique to them. It's not just universal where everyone's treated the same. And I think they've really enjoyed that, and it has driven really some extraordinary results from our clients.
That's great.
And for Dr. Holland, we had another question on Slack. As you've transitioned more back to grass rather than growing corn crops, and you were talking about the Midwest, do you see that transition back to grass being a wide-scale change that the industry is going to be making, and how is that going to be affecting the demand?
Well, I think that there's a potential for transition towards grazing lands and grasslands depending on the region, right? In our area, we produce quite a bit of corn in the Texas Panhandle, but that requires application of probably in excess of 25 to 26 inches of irrigation water, which is coming out of the Ogallala Aquifer. So that's a limited ability for us to continue to apply that water over large acreages in the future. Those areas that are well adapted to growing grains, and corn as an example, like the Midwest, Iowa and Nebraska, where they don't have to have as much supplemental irrigation, is a tremendous crop, right? Corn can be stored for a really long time. It's easy to transport. It's pretty resilient to a wide variety of environmental conditions where it can be grown. So I think that's pretty regional specific. The opportunity that we have in the High Plains and in the Panhandle is to transition towards grazing lands, and we have a really good opportunity to graze year-round. In places like the Midwest, where they might be able to grow corn, they might be under snowfall for a significant portion of the year that limits the ability to graze the grasslands that do exist there. So there's certainly supplemental feeding in grass-based production phases in that part of the world. So I think each region and area needs to adapt to what the resources that are available to them can best provide.
Very good. We're starting to run towards the end of our time period here. I want to say thank you to our panel members, and we will move now to a video on Texas Brigades. Thank you. Thank you. You're doing a great job.
Connecting with the outdoors is kind of a family business. My dad and I both share the same interests, and we kind of bond over that for the past 10 years. Livestock, grasses, nature, wildlife. Taking care of it is important to me. My dad sparked my interest in the outdoors when he took me to the ranch for the first time. I remember I have this picture of me on the back of the tailgate on top of a feed sack, and I've kind of just connected with that because I'm always outside with him. He says it's important for us to connect with the land, especially kids, because we're the next generation of conservation leaders, and we're the next generation that's going to be improving this land and improving the wildlife and the livestock. That's why Texas Brigades has been so important to me. They've sparked my interest, along with my dad, in conservation, leadership, wildlife, natural resources, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bring different aspects of this camp to my community and just teach and bring all the knowledge back that I've learned.
Hi, I'm Natalie Wolff, and I'm the Executive Director of Texas Brigades. We're a youth leadership and development organization, getting these kids into nature. Every year, we work with over 300 kids from communities across the state, covering a wide range of natural resource education topics. This week is Ranch Brigade, so they're going to learn about land stewardship and livestock production, and of course, leadership and development. What we do at camp is really intense. We push them. These kids are learning how everything is connected. It's more than just cattle. It's also how to treat the land. Over the last 50 years, Texas has grown increasingly more urban. What that means is sometimes we're just not naturally connected to nature like we used to be. The kids see that it doesn't matter if you're in the city or not. What that farmer does affect you.
So when I attended my first Texas Brigades camp, I went to Rolling Plains Bobwhite Brigade. I was very shy and I was not outgoing at all.
How much did you know?
I knew whatever my dad told me, so not that much.
He's gonna hear that.
I don't care, he's gonna get so mad at me. You can cut that part out, right? I don't think he'll be very happy.
Make sure we include it.
Texas Brigades is preparing me for the future. This year I'm an assistant herd leader, and I work with a lot of the younger cadets. It's made me more confident talking in front of other people, which before Brigades I would never be able to do.
Our mission is to educate and empower the next generation of Texas land stewards. Sometimes they don't know what land stewardship is, they don't know what conservation is, but they're curious and they want to learn. You get to see them grow up and be that conservation ambassador that we're trying to get them to be.
There's a lot of people that come from cities. This is a great opportunity for them.
You're looking at kids from all over the Lone Star State: DFW, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, Amarillo.
I've kind of figured out what I've wanted to do with my life. We know we're the next generation of conservation leaders, and we're gonna be ready. Because pretty soon it's gonna be all up to us. It's important for people to push you to be a better version of yourself. I know that's why Texas Brigades has been so important to me.
By the time they leave, they've potentially found a new passion, a new mission in life. That transformation is Texas Brigades.
I really enjoy helping. Just doing what I love helped make conservation in the outdoors a big part of my life.